admitting folks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll wait just a few moments here to let everyone get connected. All right, so my name is Vanessa. I'm with the Dallas Public Library, and we partner with the Department of Environmental, the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability on this program series, Earth Day Every Day. So thank you so much for joining us. Just a few housekeeping things for today. As you notice, you have to accept an agreement for recording. So if you don't want to appear on the recording, you can go ahead and turn your camera off. Also, you will be muted during the presentation, but if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put those in the chat and we'll get to those after the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Blythe and let her introduce what they do and also our speaker for today. Thank you so much, Blythe.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Earth Day Every Day. I believe this will be our last session for July, so we're doing a really nice July finale for today. But I'm going to share my screen really shortly. If you've been to Earth Day Every Day 7, 8, 9 times or never been here before, I'm just going to show you a little bit about who we are, what we do. And if you've never heard of us, that's completely okay as well. And as Vanessa said, it took me a little bit to get that all really nicely said. And if my screen looks okay, just feel free. We are the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. And that did take me about 8 months to say in a nice succession, but we are the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. And if you've never heard of us, that's completely okay. Right now is the time to hear about us. So we started off in 2004 and have been growing ever since. But something that I just want to mention out of our timeline that is really, really wonderful is our Comprehensive Environmental Action Plan that was unanimously voted by City Council on May 27th. Which allowed us to really kick off the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So it's been a year since then, and we have, I believe, really kicked off about 47 actions out of the 97. Either way, we're really cranking away with our action items on our climate action plan, and it's been a really wonderful succession. So if you are curious about Dallas's climate action plan, there are climate action plans in other cities, especially on the coast as well. You can go to dallasclimateaction.org to learn a little bit more about that. But for me and myself too, I am in outreach and education. You can see all of the different things that the Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability Department does. I almost like to say our department now as a little bit of a fun word puzzle, but we also call ourselves DEQS as well. But if you like the environment, if you're in sustainability, if you are environmentally conscious and you're in the DFW area, City of Dallas is a wonderful place that is very environmentally supported by the city and our city workers. So I'm in outreach and education, and in outreach and education, we like to say that we cover topics from A to Z. I would say today we're going to cover a lot of different letters. We're going to talk about stormwater management as well, because we love talking about stormwater here. But we're also going to focus on the letter E for education too, with our special guest, Dr. Cairns. But before we go into that, we saw that stormwater management title right there in that nice green. And I just want to remind us that stormwater is our water and we have to take care of it. And if we do take care of it already, you're doing a great job and please keep doing it. But some easy ways to take care of our stormwater is to never litter, to pick up after our pets, to pick up after our leaf or grass clippings if we're raking the lawn or we're mowing the lawn as well. We want to pick up those grass clippings so it doesn't clog our storm drains like in this picture here. And if we're taking care of the air, we're taking care of our water, because the water cycle, right, guys? So just some nice tips to help take care of our stormwater. And we can see here that all of that trash was swept away in our storm drains. And whatever goes down our storm drains will end up in our rivers, our lakes, and our creeks, and our oceans. So if we pick up that pet waste before that heavy Texas rainstorm, chances are that pet waste and its toxins will not go into our backyards, into our groundwater, nor will it run off into our streets. So just by doing that, you're being a good neighbor and taking care of our stormwater. So those are our wonderful little reminders that we like to do here within every day on outreach and education within Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability Department. But today, I hope you feel a little bit more enthusiastically empowered to save the earth. I hope you feel a little bit more enthusiastically empowered overall. I just wanted to introduce my special guest for today, which is Dr. Cairns. And I'm going to read their bio really shortly, and then I'm just going to let you kick it off. But Dr. Marian Cairns is an environmental anthropologist. So just starting off, a wonderful thing to look into. But she's dedicated to using creative research design and cultural understanding to safeguard environmental resources and human health. Her work has examined the politics of water and sanitation system design and development, the impacts of tourism on coastal water quality and human health, and the viability of low-cost technologies to treat wastewater and polluted rivers. So she's really touched a lot of different things within environmental anthropology. And her newest research focuses and examines the waste that the fashion industry produces from an interdisciplinary perspective, and forwards ethnography-informed approach to data science and supply chain modeling. So hello, thank you so much for being on here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fun. So yes, thank you so much for that great intro. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to meet everybody. I'm going to start off with like a few slides just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. Many people have not ever heard of an environmental anthropologist before, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is. To set some expectations for today, I know there are a lot of different ways that these lectures are done, but there's going to be a little bit of audience participation at different times. So if you could please make sure that you know where your chat button is in Zoom so that you can put some stuff in the chat. I always tell people, if you're able to turn your video on, please do. If you're not able, that's totally fine. But if you happen to be able, for the benefit of the other people who can't, go ahead and turn your video on, but no pressure. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. Got a little bit of a PowerPoint to start with. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes, that looks good. And then, yeah, play
okay.
Inside. Awesome.
So again, my name is Marianne Cairns. I am an assistant professor of anthropology at SMU here in Dallas. My research really centers around environment, infrastructure, and health. And we're going to talk about all of those themes going throughout this presentation. To get started a little bit, I wanted to give you an outline. I'm going to give you an overview of environmental anthropology and what the heck that is. I'm going to make it very clear that I do not work in a vacuum all by myself. I work with a whole lab of students and trainees. I'm going to show you all of their pictures. We're going to talk about why that's important and why the collaborative model of the research is important. I'm going to give you an introduction to my research profile, and I'm really going to focus on two projects, one about wastewater and coastal pollution, and the other one about sustainable fashion. And because sustainable fashion is really my newest research project and approach, and it's set in Dallas, I'm going to give that one a little bit more focus than the first one. But I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions and discussions at the end, because I think, you know, this was billed as a conversation about sustainability, and I want it to be that. So I hope that we can be chatty toward the end. And this is really something that is here for you guys. So those of you who are here live, I want to make sure that we interact. Okay, so what is environmental anthropology? Environmental anthropology, oops, see, I told you I'd show their pictures. There we go, okay. Environmental anthropology is the study of humans and the environment. So anthropology is the study of humans. Environmental anthropology puts the environment in there. And essentially, we look at the relationships between humans and the environment as kind of a constantly shifting and always connected circular relationship. So one of the first things I'm going to ask you guys to do in the chat, and you're like, oh my God, why are you doing this to me? What do you think of as the environment? When we talk about that, what are some key words that comes to mind? So a lot of times people are like green, right? National parks. Like, what comes up when I tell you to think about the environment? What do you think we're about to have a discussion about? Okay, so I'm getting some good stuff in here. Biodiversity, land, ocean, forest, air, water, dirt, animals, plants, soil, animals, carbon sinks. Okay, yeah, absolutely. So there's all kinds of different things that come up when we think about the environment, animals and their surroundings. I love it. Okay, so one of the things that I want to do right off the bat is just kind of ask you guys, is the environment the little weeds coming through the cracks in the parking lot of your apartment building? Is that the environment, right? Is inside your house the environment? I think one of the things that we can do to start is really rethink what we include as part of the environment. And a lot of stuff in environmental anthropology right now, yes, thank you, okay, got some people totally on board with the weed in the backyard being part of the environment, is start to deconstruct, I think, especially in spaces where we're taught to think about humans as separate from the environment, as an environment, something that we're supposed to save or conserve. There's a lot of difficulty like thinking about all of those things as circular. I know some of you guys in the audience are scientists and have really thought through these things in great detail, but I think that's one of the first things that we need to do, is that we're always looking at humans as a part of that, right? We don't want to look at environments as kind of cordon off things that aren't affected by humans. I do a lot of political ecology, which is essentially looking at an environmental problem and assuming that there is something political or human behind the problem happening. So you can't say the words, the land was degraded, without going and looking, okay, wait a second, who degraded the land? What degraded the land? What all is embedded within that, okay? So environmental anthropology often is very, open-ended. I study water and pollution. I know people who study, environmental health impacts from air pollution. Like there's so many different types of studies that happen within this field. Okay. Generally, we end up talking to live humans. That's one thing that divides a couple of the subfields of anthropology. We talk to live humans. We do a lot of interviews, focus groups, things like that. All right. So here's my lab. We have a ton of different people working together. Lots of PhD students, undergraduate students. We've got some really great partners at the university from OIT and from other programs. And I really have created the lab to allow for collaborative kind of problem solving. And the reason that I did that is because if you're going to solve an environmental problem, you're probably going to need more than one person. It's very, very difficult to do that without lots of different types of expertise. We also do a lot of interdisciplinary work, and interdisciplinary is essentially bringing people from anthropology and engineering, multiple different scientific disciplines together. And increasingly, we're looking to do research that doesn't just push one field forward, but instead asks a question that no one field could ask without another field, if that makes sense. So we have interdisciplinary collaborative teams. We do a bunch of rigorous training in methods and technology and theory and process. We really focus a lot on mentorship. If anybody wants to talk about mentorship, I can totally wax poetic about that for a little while. And we focus as well on the accessibility of research. So I really like to make sure that we're not just writing academic journal articles that go to other academics and are read by other academics. Those are cool. We've got those too. That's important. But we also want to make sure that we're engaging community groups, that we're doing lots of different talks. I've done Instagram lives about sustainable fashion. I've gone on other people's podcasts. Some of that stuff I know that Blythe very nicely said she would put in the chat so that you guys had access to that, as well as my website where we have everything from the lab and all kinds of different things that we've done. We've got some really cool stuff like an environmental justice resource guide that goes through all of the different programs that are focusing on environmental justice. Environmental justice, real quick, I'm just going to define it. That is basically making sure that people have access to environmental resources in an equitable way. Okay, so having environmental justice would mean that everybody in the community has access to water and access to green space, and that resource is shared. Environmental injustice would show differential benefits and risks from environmental exposures and or differential benefits and risks from access to environmental resources. Okay, so basically, again, research that matters takes all hands on deck. We're really focusing on getting a lot of people on board. I say this too because I'm not going to do the full spiel until the end, but I love getting people from the community involved in research. We've got a lot of citizen science work, and that is basically where we ask citizens to participate in data collection and research processes. I'll tell you about that at the end. All right. So the driving focus behind my work is really that built and human infrastructure that enables and constrains people's access to safe water resources will shape the future of environmental sustainability and human health. Okay, that's the academic speak. But what that really means is we have all of these different technologies that are meant to treat water, that are meant to pick up waste, that are meant to go and collect all kinds of plastic waste from the ocean. And those technologies and the way that they're conceptualized, as well as the way that they're applied, that's going to be a big deal as far as how the environmental future happens. Okay, I'm going to pause again for a little bit of audience participation here. So one of the things that we like to talk about is kind of critiquing the idea of a apolitical ecology. Okay, so how many of you, if you guys know how to raise your hands, that's fine. If you can just pop on your video and raise your hand, that's totally okay too. But how many of you have heard the argument that population is going to be the end of the world and that's the thing that's going to ruin the environment forever? You can put it in the chat, whatever you need to do. Okay, I see a lot of people raising hands. I see some chitty chatting. Okay, right? So the argument against that is, well, is that the only driving force? Are there actually enough resources? Is it about how people are organized, how resources are organized, right? If everybody stopped using air conditioning, might there be a little bit more, airspace for some more people, right? So, certainly we want to look at population as one factor, but I think that is one of the things that people often hold up as like, well, population is the main problem. If we just handle population, the earth will be fine. And that is like, well, probably not exactly, right? Another thing that is often held up as a political ecology is the idea that technology will save us. Okay, it's fine. We'll just get all kinds of technologies. We'll clean it up. It's okay. We'll figure it out, right? So one way that I do this in my classes is I show like the movie trailer. Has anybody seen Ready Player One? Okay, Ready Player One, it's a movie and there's so many people on the earth and the resources are so messed up that everybody's stacked up living in shipping containers. It doesn't look great, right? But that's one type of movie that happens all the time. And I would say that that really goes for the apolitical ecology of assuming, population is going to be the problem. Then over here on the other side, we've got, what is it, Tomorrowland, that Disney movie where everybody has their own jetpack, right? Everybody loves their own jetpack. Okay, that's the technology will save us and all of a sudden we'll all have hydroponic gardens on our ceilings. That would be cool, right? But it's probably not realistic. So what I want everybody to kind of think about as we go through this is like, certainly technology is a big part of that. Certainly population is a big part of that. But the real thing is kind of how all of these things are synced up, right? So I already kind of went through this. Quick addition though, again, political ecology of water and health, interdisciplinary. We like to have policy recommendations. So a lot of academics write stuff and then you're like, well, wait, what am I supposed to do about that, right? One of the things that I find, especially with environment, if you become an environmental anthropologist officially at every single gathering for the rest of your life, people will ask you, what can I do to be sustainable? How can I be sustainable, right? Am I allowed to have straws? Am I allowed to buy things off of the internet? Should I go with Amazon, taking things to my house and dropping them off? Or should I, maybe go to this big box store? Which one is better? And I'm always like, well, it depends. Where do you live? What's the climate where you live? How much gas does your car require? How much, air conditioning does the big box store use? Are there other people near you that will have something dropped off at their house from Amazon? There's a billion questions that go into that. So everything that we do is very ethnographic. We talk to real people living real lives and try to do really in-depth data collection. But we also explore lots of different ways to kind of think about solving the problem collaboratively. Okay, so major themes that run throughout all of my work include thinking about design and regulations that prioritize attention to human health risk within this, right? Thinking about the value of reclaimable resources. So one of my favorite discussions ever in the history of my academic career was getting in an argument with the engineer that I was working with about whether or not I should use the word sewage in my dissertation. And he argued that I should call it reclaimable resources, okay? And I argued, really, I'm just saying sewage because it's an academic publication. I would like to be able to call it shit, right? And I know I just said that word, but there's a whole anthropology of shit. So I promise that's an academic thing to say. But, there is a value in looking at a resource, right? And looking at what you can get back from that. Wastewater, believe it or not, is still 99% water. You can get a lot of water out of that, but it freaks people out, right? But also, waste has a lot of resources in it too, right? You can get nutrients, lots of fertilizer, cool stuff. I did a whole project on eco toilets in Cape Cod, believe it or not. So there's a lot to be taken from that. I think a lot about labor and maintenance when it comes to these things. And I think a lot about, okay, what takes innovation and what takes low cost technologies? And that really gets back to how technologies come into all of this. All right, so right now, 2 projects examples. We are working on culturally relevant environmental health risk modeling in polluted coastal areas, and this is in Costa Rica. So basically people go, they swim, they play at the beach. Lots of people love to be tourists in other places. People love Costa Rica. You go to a big tourist town that's grown by 500% in the last 10 years. And with, their great interest in the culture and the community, they also bring all of their human waste. right? And all of that ends up in the beach. And then when people recreate at the beach, it can make them sick. So we've got a big study looking at to what level wastewater is affecting the beaches in those spaces. And we are looking at, okay, with that human health understanding, what about the politics, the development of this area? How is all of that related? And then my other big project right now is on sustainable fashion. So many people don't know that the fashion industry is responsible for a bunch of environmental impacts, right? It is responsible for 20% of global industrial wastewater. Clothing and textiles took up 14% of landfill space in the US last year. There's a lot going on with those things. Okay, so we are looking at, in Costa Rica, kind of thinking through the social and economic realities of that space and looking at, okay, what's the water quality? What are people's behaviors at the beach? How sick are they getting? And then what ecosystems, both social and otherwise, surround those groups? And we are right now at the stage where we are writing up a bunch of those data, and we're about to have a big report back process with all of the stakeholders involved, as well as people who took the study, other ocean sewage groups, to kind of report back what we learned and try to figure out, okay, how do we take all of this information and translate it into technologies and social practices that actually work to keep people healthy at the beach? Okay, real quick. Already went through that. We have multiple stakeholders and tons of student opportunities with this. We're working with the Costa Rican Institute of Aqueducts and Sewerage Systems, which is basically their EPA. We're working with the Costa Rican Ministry of Health. We're working with lots of different NGOs, as well as more than 50 students from Costa Rica. So real quick, I wanna take a second. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second, just because I feel like it's boring to watch a PowerPoint for too long. I want you guys to tell me if the last time you went on vacation anywhere, you thought about or knew where your wastewater was going when you flushed the toilet and or used another type of toilet. How many of you thought about it, knew where it was going? Not at all. Nope. It's okay. I'm not going to be upset with you. Latrine in the ground. Okay, so that's one where you kind of know where it's going, Christopher. That's usually, it's pretty obvious. Okay, and everybody, I realized that it might have been a while where, since you went on vacation, I acknowledged that COVID just happened. Oh, this is interesting. In Germany, everybody knows where it's going. Yeah, there's so many different cultural spaces there. But it's truly a huge problem. And it's something that I think, one of the biggest questions is, a lot of people who are in these spaces, this is one of my favorite things that we're still kind of working through, tourists generally are like, uh-oh, I'm worried I'm going to get sick from people in Costa Rica, from the water in Costa Rica. And the people in Costa Rica are like, uh-oh, I'm worried I'm going to get sick from all of these tourists coming in making me sick, right? So it's definitely something where tourism and, sewage waste and all of these things kind of go together. All right, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to share this again, and I'm going to move on to talking about sustainable fashion. Okay, so this is something that really exemplifies a lot of the same things that we were just talking about. Sustainable fashion needs multi-sector collaboration. You can't just work with designers or just work with consumers or just work with companies, right? This is also a really cool project for me because I've been able to engage my students in this. So I teach research methods, and each one of my classes has done a project related to sustainable fashion. And I teach both the advanced graduate methods as well as the very basic intro class for undergrads in research methods. And what's really cool is I developed the sub-project with the grad students, and then the undergrad students collect data. So we've got a really cool model going where we're teaching a lot of students research methods and teaching a lot of students about sustainable fashion. Real quick. Again, with sustainable fashion, and I'm going to stop this again for a second because I feel like you need to see my face fully. Fashion really is such an impact to the environment, and a lot of people don't think about it. It causes a lot of toxic dyes and other things to go into our oceans. It's a huge source of water pollution. It causes a bunch of waste, just, textile waste, etc. Many people don't know that actually most of the waste made when you're making a t-shirt comes before it ever gets to an individual, right? So a lot of it is from offcuts and things like that. There's so much transportation involved in fashion now because most of the things that you made, if you like look at a tag that you're wearing, is from another country. And that process has become more and more globalized and more problematic as we go on. I'm gonna do another audience participation thing. How much do you think a t-shirt should cost? Put it in the chat. You're like, I feel like this is a trick question because you just said it's hard to make one. How much do you think it should cost? $5, $40, $35, realistically like $40, $6. Okay. One more. I need one more person to tell me what a t-shirt costs. Thank you, Peggy. 10, 80, 45. Okay. So we're getting some different numbers. And luckily, I have been able to ask these types of questions of lots of different people through the projects that we're doing. And I'm telling you, the ranges for like, how much do you think a pair of jeans should cost are like between $100 and $400, right? There's so much variation within this. And I think we've gotten to the point where, frankly, it's perfectly understandable that people get used to having cheap clothes, right? Clothing is one of the only, consumer goods that has actually gone down in price as wages have risen over time, which is kind of weird to think about. But, has anybody ever tried to make a t-shirt? I'm just curious. Okay, Blythe, you've made one?
I have tried to make a t-shirt before, but it just doesn't feel the same as a store-bought.
All right, it's difficult to make a t-shirt. It takes a while, right? The fabric is important, the textiles are important. Yet we kind of expect them to sometimes be free, right? How many people are like, I don't know, I just get them from the races that I run or whatever it might be. So at the same time, when we see a piece that has been made quote unquote sustainably, and we're about to talk about why I have to use air quotes when I say that, it is often much more expensive because the labor involved, the resources involved, etc., have made it quite costly. So real quick, the chat's blowing up. I'm gonna have to read it real quick. Okay, so stretch fabric is a pain to work with. Loving sewing, it's really creative. Yes, that's really cool. You have to have a steady hand to cut patterns. It's difficult, right? So real quick, when I say sustainable clothing, I want you to know that that is a very complex concept. But does anybody have a brand that they think is sustainable that they could put in the chat? I will not be endorsing any particular brands during this presentation, but I'm just curious what people are thinking. And I have no idea is a perfectly reasonable answer. Tea Turtle, Banana Republic has a section for it. None are, now that I realize what's happening. If there is, it's too expensive. Okay, valid. These are valid responses, guys. So one of the things that I find when people talk about sustainability, right, is that nobody really knows exactly what we're talking about when we say sustainability, right? Also, they're not quite sure who's doing it. And usually when somebody tells them what the ideal sustainable thing is, they're like, that doesn't sound like an actual thing that I can do in real life, right? Whether it be cost, whether it be just, how resources happen, whether or not it's all marketing BS. I love that, Yvonne. There's a lot of things that come in when it gets to people thinking about, all right, what's sustainable? And so I'm going to give you, again, this is an ongoing project, so I reserve the right to refine this. But when I talk about sustainability, I always talk about sustainability as a focus on what matters. I don't like to think of sustainability just from the environmental space, right? I really care about water. I spend a lot of time thinking about water pollution and how we clean it up. But I also think that embedded within sustainability is a focus on culture, is a focus on retaining the things that we really care about, is a focus on making sure people are treated well, right? And I think fashion is a particularly interesting area to look at these things, because oftentimes what I see is a company will have recycled sneakers made out of recycled pop bottles, right? But they're not really talking about the ethics of it, it's where it's made. You don't really know where the factory is. You're like, well, that's cool, it's made out of pop bottles, right? But then, you know, that gets confusing. And then somebody ends up, if they're really into it, telling you, well, you know, plastics get into the ocean through microplastics. And if you wash stuff in the washer, then you're actually contributing to that pollution. And sometimes it feels like no matter what you do, you're a horrible person that's contributing to pollution. And you're never going to be able to be sustainable. How many of you guys have felt that emotion? I have felt that emotion. Okay, absolutely, exclamation point, right. Okay, so this is certainly something that comes up. And I always tell anybody I'm talking to from the very beginning, I know I'm an environmental anthropologist. I am not perfect. I live in an apartment. I'm talking to you on e-waste, right? Like I'm talking to you on future e-waste. It's really difficult, especially within the structures that we live in, to be perfectly sustainable. I have been to Starbucks, right? I will admit that right now. And I think it's really important to think about, okay, what steps can we take that are feasible individually? And then what steps really need to be structurally taken? So one of the things that I always kind of like with my face is when people say, well, it's your responsibility to handle that as a consumer. One of the things that people say that drives me more crazy than anything else is vote with your wallet. I'm like, you know, why don't you vote with your giant, powerful, whatever it is I'm supposed to be spending my wallet money on? I just have one wallet, right? So that is a really important concept to kind of get to and think about. And I want us to make sure that we're thinking about those structures. And I think that's one of the best kind of contributions of anthropology, is that we're able to really think about things holistically, think about the structures that are in place, but also think about how individual action can play in, right? My dog has decided to join us. Apologies for the distraction in the background, but he's a very good dog anthropologist. He's been in all of my classes for the last many years on Zoom. So anyway, point being, there really is a need to think about how to blend the individual and the structural, and not just, you know, I love somebody put producer responsibility exclamation point in the chat, definitely, but also, you know, our representatives, government responsibility, also, you know, basically cross-sector approaches. We need to think about anybody that makes policy. We need to think about anybody that is involved with the public. Academics, frankly, we're not super great at talking to people all the time, right? I tend to be pretty chatty, but like at the same time, there's a lot of difficulty getting academic information into the public trusting academic information. It's always changing. So that's a long way of saying, basically, sustainable fashion is the perfect thing to study if you want to look at that messy tangle, because everybody from the UN to Vogue is starting to come out and say that the biggest question in sustainable fashion is how the heck we're going to get all of these different players to work together to solve the problem. Because if I decided I was going to make, you know, a way that jeans took less water to make jeans, that's great. But all right, why are people buying 20 pairs of jeans? We should probably work with like consumer expectations about jeans, right? Not to mention, well, maybe like, you know, we should make it so that people have a living wage so that they're able to, you know, buy jeans that aren't fast fashion. Quick definition of fast fashion. Fast fashion is usually referred to referring to clothing that is made very quickly on a style cycle that kind of, you know, constantly is at clip. Usually it's very badly made clothing. Usually it's made with plastic type fabric. So can anybody put in the chat an example of fast fashion if they happen to know it? Or maybe just using that definition. Forever 21. Okay, yeah, that's a classic one that comes up. H&M, yes, okay. So there are a lot of these places that have so many pieces of clothing, right? So again in the chat, and then we're gonna actually go full chat, and I'm gonna try to get you guys talking and maybe get every single one of you talking, because I see that we have 22 participants and I know I can pull that off. I want you guys to tell me approximately about how many pairs of jeans you think people need. And tell the truth. 3, 7, 3 to 4, 5. 2, okay. Now, how many pairs of jeans do people actually have? Just curious. 20, 25, 4. Okay, all right. So, you know, these things range. And guys, I'm not perfect. I've really got a penchant for leather jackets. I love them. I don't know. I've started buying them used. I don't even know if that is really the right thing to do. But really thinking about the choices that we're making, that's definitely part of it. But holding producers and other people responsible for making sure that we're dealing with waste from the fashion industry is another thing. Okay, so officially, I know that you have me on like the pinned piece, but I am going to just like try to be able to see more of you. And I'm getting some really interesting things in the chat here. I want to get us into a discussion mode, basically, because going forward, what I really want us to do is think about what collaborations need to happen, right? Think about the fact that I have my PowerPoint slide here. I'm just going to talk about it. Think about the fact that it's not necessarily zero sum, right? It's not like there is X amount of environment for Y amount of people. It could be something that could get bigger or smaller, right? This isn't necessarily a zero sum game. And also I want us to kind of rethink our environmental futures. And I want us to think about how we can get culturally appropriate solutions that bring together municipalities and universities and nonprofit sectors, but also respect where people live, right? And what people need. And really think about ways to get our environmental futures to line up more with what we wish they would look like, right? More with like the values that we expect. Again, sustainability being a focus on what matters, okay? So I'm gonna kind of open it up with any questions that people have about the specific projects that I'm doing. I'm happy to hear that. And then I've got a couple things to kind of lead discussions as we go along. So nobody's getting out of here any earlier because I will come up with questions if you don't. So any questions, first of all?
I'll keep an eye on the chat. We do have some viewers on YouTube too who are chatting in too that were answering some early questions alongside what is the environment and things like that.
That's great. All right. What were their questions?
We have some interaction on YouTube too. So if you're on YouTube and you're watching this too, feel free to answer any questions into the chat and we can get those answered here on our Zoom room. And we do have a question here on what fabrics are the most toxic? And you may or may not. Do you know that?
So I know that this is a question and people ask me it all the time. And my answer is an anthropologist's favorite answer, which it depends, right? I think really when it comes down to this question, so many people are like, what should I wear, right? What kind of fabric should I wear? And the reason it depends is because yes, certain fabrics potentially are much more harmful than other fabrics, but a lot of the like usual suspects for that, people will argue, well, it can be recycled, but then we make so much of it that like basically there's enough legging material out there that we never have to make fabric for another pair of leggings in the universe, right? They are plastic pants. We've got plenty of stuff for plastic pants in the future, right? And when it comes to, you know, quote unquote, natural fabrics, there's a lot of stuff in there, like cotton, for instance, can be, but it takes a whole lot of water to make cotton, so it depends, right? Silk can be, right? But then there are the ethical and kind of practical components of that, right? Like people who are really into animals' rights are like, silk shouldn't be our fallback, right? For me, what fabrics are the most toxic? It's one of those questions that I'm like, well, what do you need, right? Like, do you need a ball gown? Do you need a t-shirt? Do you need some pants? And so there's so many different things that go into that. A lot of people are like, well, get used clothing. Yes, that can be good, right? But if you're like, I'll get used clothing, but I'll still get 8,000 pieces of clothing and let them live in my closet forever. I think there was a study that like the average person in the UK has 1.5 storage units. And it's like, what's in there? What are we doing with all that stuff, right? I think, you know, I'm happy to talk through if anybody has a specific example. I think used can be really great. There was just a study that came out that showed that renting clothing, while it was billed as more sustainable, the kind of dry cleaning components of renting clothing really made it a wash. It's one of those things that's specific. So I will not give you a specific answer, but I will tell you what I do, because that sometimes makes people feel better. I try to buy things, well, first of all, I try to borrow them or not buy them at all, right? Then I try to buy things used close to me from a company that I feel like is actually getting, you know, something back to the people that need it. Then if I can't do that, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna try to pay for something ethically made and sustainable. I know a lot of sustainable designers. Usually that's quite expensive. I'm a professor. It's delightful. I always say I'm a very, very successful anthropologist. It means I'm kind of broke sometimes, right? So like I can't always buy their clothing. So then I would try to get something that is at least one or the other, right? Environmentally friendly or something that's made very ethically. And in the end, I try to just get something that I love and I'll use forever. And one of the things I try to think about is what is the cost of the piece of clothing divided by the number of times that I wear it, right? Instead of thinking of the cost of a piece of clothing as just the price of the item. So I'm willing to spend a little bit more on, pants that I'll wear all the time, a jacket that I'll wear all the time, a shirt that I'll wear all the time. And I try to just get things that are well made and do good. So I'm not going to tell you that you have to be perfect with that. I hope that answered that question in a way. Got some other stuff here. What did I see? I like this one. As an academic, how do I see the balance between consumer-driven activism and government regulation? I love that question. And I think that the word balance within that question is key, right? I do think it's a balance. I'm never going to tell anybody, well, just, don't worry about it. You're an individual. You can't really, solve the problem all by yourself. So whatever you do, just don't worry about it. I'm never going to say that. I do think there's an element of individual responsibility to the point that we're able to. And I do think government regulation really has to come into this in a certain way. And we need for that regulation and for our representatives to really think about the things that matter to us, the values of the constituency. And those can vary based on where you're at in the country, right? But I think that's why the way that we've set it up so that there are representatives of different types from different places, that those conversations really need to happen. So I tend to think that individual responsibility is very important, but anytime the focus is entirely on individual responsibility, I get cranky and I start running my mouth and I'm like, it shouldn't just be on individuals. A good example of this in a completely different space is air quality and asthma. So a lot of times when we're talking about air quality and asthma, people will be told, well, clean up your house. Get rid of the roaches in your house, while they're like living next to a factory belching a bunch of smoke in the air. And they're like, I don't have asthma because I'm not cleaning my house. I have asthma because I live next to this giant factory belching smoke in the air. So those kinds of things really need to be considered holistically. And I see that balance being, it being one of the responsibilities of academics to call out and discuss the different levels at which these problems occur and the different types of responsibilities that different spaces can take. And my responsibility, in my opinion, is to never let it be a conversation that only focuses on individual responsibility, because I think that that's often crap, frankly. Other questions?
I see one here too. How can we create a solution, which is a great conversation starter, and we'll see what answers we can create, but how do we create a solution to landfilling and donating used clothing?
Okay, I love this. So I talked about the amount of landfill space that clothing took up. I'm also just going to put out there that essentially, when you donate a piece of clothing, often only about 20% of that clothing remains in the United States. A lot of it is shipped overseas and ends up interrupting textile markets and other spaces. So from one of my very early studies in Bolivia on wastewater treatment, in a conversation that I had, which may have been one of the original sparks to the Sustainable Fashion Project, they were talking about things that the government was trying to legislate. And to date, I have never been able to find out if this is completely true or not, but it was at least true in the zeitgeist of the time. So they were talking about the fact that in Bolivia, they really wanted to ban foreign clothing because foreign clothing was interrupting local textile markets. It was making things difficult because it was so cheap when it came in. And they said that they were only able to ban foreign underwear. And I usually tell that story because it makes my students laugh really hard because I say the word underwear. But it just goes to show that it can be very difficult to for other countries to kind of push back against the glut of clothing that comes in. I work in Costa Rica now, and they always have these stores called Ropa Americana, and they're basically Goodwill in Costa Rica, and it does interrupt local textile markets. Anyway, so saying that first, donating used clothing, landfilling, I think I would love to see companies take responsibility for the life cycle of their garment thoughtfully. I recently wrote a paper with a colleague, Ethan Lassity, about recycling programs with companies and kind of looking at the very complicated nature of this problem, where essentially they're trying to incentivize recycling through giving you 20% off your next thing, right? So it's still kind of supporting consumption in that way. But I do think that there's an element of it would be really great to see companies take responsibility for that and maybe, say, okay, we'll bring it back, we'll, repair it, we'll get it to another person. I think that I saw somebody put circular economy in the chat there. I think there's some really interesting things where we might be able to start working towards circular economies of certain different textiles. I don't think that's going to solve the whole problem because there's a bunch of clothes already out there. I think if you guys can be thoughtful about what you're throwing away and thoughtful about, why. I think trends, for instance, are circular. You can always get things tailored, right? Like shirts that were really long were in for a while, and now shirts that are short and cropped are in. Can you go get it tailored? Can you take it to the actual recycle center instead of just throwing it in the trash? Can you get it to a place where you feel like it could be reused? One of my favorite things is like, okay, which one of my friends might like this? And I had this hat and I have no idea why I bought this hat. This was a bad choice of hat, but I sent it to a friend of mine that I know it would look great on her. She loves it and she wears it all the time. So, is there an actual human that you can get it to? I've heard some arguments that actually consigning can be better and more sustainable than donating sometimes. So if it's a specific type of garment, I had a really great experience in DC with Dress for Success. We were on the street. I was on the street with another person who was a fellow in DC, and we were talking about where should we donate our stuff? Like these are some things. And my friend was like, I'm thinking about donating Dress for Success. And the woman in front of us turned around and was like, I got my first suit through Dress for Success. She's like, I'm a assistant on the Hill now. It changed my life. Like she almost cried in the street. So now I really try to get my professional clothing to Dress for Success, but there's so many different answers to that. Okay. Let's see here. Buy less to begin with. Love that. Yes. Okay. I'm seeing this from YouTube. How in fact impactful are clothing swaps on diverting clothes from landfills, etc. I don't have a statistic for that, but I will tell you that if you can get the piece of clothing in the hands of somebody who will use it, that might keep them from buying that exact same thing, it couldn't hurt, right? This problem is big though. And so, I think a lot more people are going to need to do clothing swaps before I'm really able to measure that. But I love that question. I'll tell you what, do a clothing swap and let's see, like hopefully in 10 years, it's a real big deal. I would love to see that. Any other questions?
I'm referring back to my notes here too, because I took down a lot and my mic kept telling me I was muted because I kept going, So just overall wonderful information to know. And something I just want to mention too is that every interaction I've had with you, it seems like you know what you know, and if you don't know it, you want to learn it. And if there's more questions to be posed, you want to ask those to the group, not only as an academic professor, but as a human. And you've said it yourself that these are all big problems to tackle. And I think sometimes maybe we can feel hopeless because we see these professionals knowing exactly what they're doing or talking about the environment and their ways and their work on how to do it. And then we think we're just folks in a Zoom room. And I just want to thank you for, being a folk along with us and just being a person and just giving even your personal advice, because I feel like at the end of the day too, sometimes people just need, should I keep these or should I throw these away? And just thanks for having that holistic view within your studies, because it seems like within a lot of work you do, even while mentoring students and working from grad students and then undergrad students too, but in this collaborative affair is really important and is a giant message and theme of how we're going to be able to help our planet, is a giant collaborative affair from the people at top and the people in the mid and the people around us working all together. So I guess that's just something I wanted to mention too. And then I'm going to post your website. We have a question about your Instagram as well. So I will put that in the chat. And so look in the chat for some tasty links, and then best organizations to join to fight these issues as a group, which is a wonderful question.
Yeah. Okay. So I heard a couple of different things in your discussion that you just had live that I want to respond to, and then I will definitely answer the best organizations. So the the whole thing about, scientists having an answer to a thing and like not being folks. I love that you just said that, because I think really these problems are so big and there's so many different angles to it. And also, I don't know about you guys, but I think a lot of people that really, really care about the environment can then just feel a little defeated because there's so many different ways to help the environment and try to protect it, right? And you're like, wait, okay, you're talking about sustainable fashion. You're also talking about wastewater. Which one do I focus on first? Like where my wastewater goes, or how I handle my clothing? I can't tell you that. Which one can you handle first? Which one are you most interested in, right? I think there's enough environmental problems that if you're really interested in one, take that thread and run with it. That's one of my favorite things about working with students, is that, they really get interested in particular things and chase it. I've got a student right now who's working, her name's Megan Brown. She's about to finish her PhD this year, and she's working on reforestation and health. And she's like, okay, everybody says that that deforestation is bad for health. We've been able to show that, but nobody's really studied whether or not reforestation actually restores health, or if it doesn't work that way. Like, can you ever get an environment back? So I love that work that she's doing, and I love being able to mentor students and kind of look at lots of different environmental problems that way. I definitely want to get people involved. If any of you are listening and you're like, ooh, environmental anthropology sounds awesome, and I would love to be an environmental anthropologist, and how does that work? Please get on my website, email me. I think sometimes people are nervous to email professors. Like, anybody who's like, we love your work, we want to talk to you. I'm like, ooh, captive audience, I would love to do that. Please email me. So sincerely, email me, we'll chat. So getting involved is a big thing. Let's see here. I had a question back here. Best organizations to join to fight these issues as a group. There's so many different organizations out there, and there are so many different ways to attack this. Start with an interest, contact me. Like, I would love it if you guys got involved and stayed involved with things that we're doing in the lab. There's a lot of different things there. But if you really care about streams, right? There's a lot of different groups that go out and do, citizen science, collecting samples of streams so that we can look at water quality. If you really love clothing, or if you really love turtles, whatever it might be, there's something out there for you. I have a friend and colleague, Jenna Jambeck, who started a citizen science app called Marine Debris Tracker. And it is basically an app where you can track the type of trash that's around you and clean it up. And it's a great way to track trash. And she has like tons of people participating now, and people have cleaned up a ton of trash based on that app. So I can give you some recommendations based on your interests, but there's so many different things that you could do. Definitely reach out to us though, join us. Let's see here. I love these two. Okay. Manufacturing of clothes. Are there better technologies or innovations to make it easier to fabricate a material that will last longer? Okay, so there's a lot of really cool engineering going on about fabrics and about trying to, hack those processes. There's some people in Italy that developed, I don't know if you guys know, but like distressing jeans takes like a wicked ton of water. Just a couple facts on jeans. It can take up to 20,000 liters of water to make one pair of jeans. And yet the average American throws away 81 pounds of clothes a year, right? So woof, that's a big one. But also when it comes to like these engineering solutions to make better fabrics, less waste from it, material that will last longer, there is a lot of that. There's some really cool innovations. Again, though, I don't like to see those innovations happening without it being connected to a wider discussion of why this is happening. One thing that I always say to my students is, as an environmental anthropologist, I'm never asking how do we build a better mousetrap. I'm always asking, why are we killing all these mice, right? So I think that that's the piece that it really needs to continue to be focused on in sustainable fashion. Let's see here. Can I tell you a few points about what your day might look like in the lab? Is it all teaching, or do you spend a lot of time on research? Okay, I love this question. And I'm happy to tell you how I ended up a scientist and a professor. It could have gone either way, multiple points in my career. I was a B+ student hard for a while. But I think that, the lab is really dynamic, and that's one of my favorite things. The way that a professorship is set up is that essentially approximately 40 to 50% of your time is for research, 40% of your time is for teaching, and then 10% is for this thing called service, and that's like committees that you might be on, or public talks that you might do, or whatever it might be. For me, all of those things blend together, and they all live, in my mind, under research and education, right? So I spend a ton of time on research. I actually have research projects right now. I have one that's funded by NSF, the National Science Foundation. So I spend a lot of time on that project in Costa Rica. I spend a lot of time on the work that I'm doing with sustainable fashion. I'm always on research calls, sometimes across different time zones. Ooh, that gets a lot. I would say I definitely end up talking to somebody about research at least once or twice a day. When I'm teaching, a lot of my time goes to that, especially with everything going on Zoom. That was wild for a second. But a lot of my time goes to teaching. Again, though, I teach on these topics. So I teach a course called Humanity and Global Environmental Change. And so we're always talking about this. And one cool thing is I've worked with a professor over at UNT, Barbara Trippier, and we are doing a linked project in our class where her students who are design students and my students who are anthropology students are going to work together to do a sustainable fashion project that we've put together. And that'll be a week of that class. I also teach research methods classes. And in my research methods classes, we do research that's like real research that has IRB approval. IRB is the Institutional Review Board. Those are the people that say that your research is ethical and give you permissions, and there's oversight, and that's really important. But actually, we just wrote up and published one of the ones that we did during COVID on how students were adjusting during COVID. So if you want to see that, that's on my website. But I do a lot of collaborative research that way. I do a lot of I'm on the committee for diversity and inclusion at SMU. I try to make sure that I'm doing a lot of kind of like the service stuff that relates to the main foci of my research as well. So anything that gets students and people involved in research and involved in solving environmental problems, to me, it's all going in the same bucket. Sometimes I do awesome talks like this. So yeah. I will say one cool thing that a lot of people don't know about professors. We are on 9-month contracts. So usually we do not quote unquote work during the summer. So oftentimes I am out in the field. I was in Costa Rica all 3 months of the summer before COVID started. So I spend a lot of time in the field doing field work and research during the summers.
Just for my own questions and wonderings and things like that, I guess mentioned too, it can feel like it's hard to put your foot in the door of sustainability if you're approaching it from the outside, whether that be in academia or you don't have, you're not with the city in the environmental quality or sustainability department or what have you, or just within my personal life. So how would you say that you got your foot in the door, whether that was at age 6 and being outside or doing a mentorship thing in high school, even just, I'm curious of taking it back for us for a moment.
How I ended up here? I love that question. It is not a straight line. It is very windy. But, I grew up in rural Indiana. My town that I grew up in had less than 5,000 people. So it was a very tiny town. I think I was also always fascinated with other cultures. Like I loved social studies. I loved learning. I loved thinking about ancient societies. I also really cared about the environment. And this is like, the trees that were on our grade school parking lot that we played at recess, right? It's kind of fascinated by it. But that didn't really crystallize. My undergrad degree is in classics. So I studied Latin and Greek and classical art and architecture. I also studied political science. And a lot of like what ended up here, I really needed a job and I needed a job that paid well. And there was this refugee center that my friend was leaving that. And she, said, hey, you could do this job, it pays $9 an hour. And I was like, $9 an hour, I'll do anything that pays $9 an hour. So I ended up working at this refugee center and I worked with people from, I think, 15 or 16 different cultures from all over the world, from Somali Bantu to people who had lived in the former Yugoslavia, like just tons and tons of people. And I got a really great kind of entry there. I thought that I wanted to do international development as a result of that. I was really interested in refugee policy. And then I got to international development. And while I learned a ton, I felt like they were kind of forgetting the people, right? And I got really interested in people's actual experiences of these big problems, like, so of, environmental change, of, war, politics, et cetera. And I found anthropology actually as a PhD student. So I took prereqs and I went back to school in anthropology, and ended up doing what I'm doing. One thing that I will say that was always a thread when I was doing classics, I was studying ancient water systems and ancient toilets. No joke, I wrote a paper on it. When I was doing international development, I was really interested in how water as a resource affected that. And I continue to focus on water. So actually, I feel like I'm a water researcher in a very deep way, even beyond being an environmental anthropologist. But I think this was the right frame to be able to study the problems that I was looking at. And I always say there's no such thing as a self-made scientist. Like, it's just not a thing. So I've had such amazing mentors throughout this that have given me opportunities and, like, you know, told me to apply to things. Like, I don't think when I was an undergrad, I knew that they had research assistantships, but like, I was like, oh, that's not for me. That couldn't possibly be for me. Somebody else can do that who's better than me. I never did an undergrad assistantship. You know, I think one of the things that is so exciting for me about having a lab now is I can be like, you had a good comment in class today. You should apply for a research assistantship. Yes, you specifically, please apply. So, you know, I think there was just a lot throughout that. I did a fellowship at the EPA before I came to SMU. My mentor there was amazing. So I've just gotten the privilege of amazing education and people kind of, you know, giving me the legs up that I needed at different times. And I'm so thankful for that. So I'm happy to talk more about that to anybody who might, you know, want to be an environmental anthropologist and contact us and maybe join our program. But also, you know, these things happen in weird ways. Did I answer your question-ish?
Yes, wonderfully. And I'm going to put Mary, or Dr. Cairns was on a podcast recently for Unhealthy Waters, and I'm going to put that in the chat as well, just because I gave it a listen beforehand. And if you are just curious more about the water side of all of this conversation, I think it's a really, it's a 30-minute listen. It's nothing too committing, and you just put it on, and it taught me a lot, even with your background too, and things like that. So we are at the top of the hour, and I just want to say, first and foremost, I so appreciate your time. I so appreciate you trying to, you know, making a conversational space here, because that's where it begins, is the conversations at our dinner table. I know we heard it as kids or growing up, but really just talking to your peers, peer to peer, about how you can better be an ambassador for the environment is totally possible. And I appreciate your time in just reaffirming that in me personally. But if there's anything else, let us know. And I just want to say thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for participating and, you know, playing along here. Please reach out. I would love to continue to speak. I love talking tons of different places. If you've got a place that you want me to talk, I'll probably do it. So let me know what I can do. Please keep in touch. If you follow our Instagram, we put anything that we're up to there. Like Blythe said, there's the podcast that I recently did. I did a really cool thing with Lenora Billings Harris about environmental racism that you can look at online on the website. There's some other stuff to listen to. So please reach out, and thank you so much. I will also say, I love the mill about after a lecture, so I'm happy to stay around for another 10 minutes if people have questions that they want to ask me personally. I blocked a little extra time. So thanks, everybody. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. And I guess for just closeout messages too, I think the Dallas Public Library will follow, but I'll say we also do this version for kids. So we have Earth Kids next week, which is all about how does pollutants hurt our water, which is very on theme. So I did a tiny URL of Earth Kids Can Save Our Water. You could intend to, I'll be there. And I usually talk to kids like I do with adults in this kind of manner. So I appreciate everyone's attended, whether it's on Zoom or YouTube. Marianne's still around for some questions if you've got anything lingering, but I did put your link tree in the chat as well, just because that's a nice, colorful way to see all the tasty things that you've been getting up to. And I really appreciate that.
Perfect.
And again, we're the Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability Department. This is Earth Day every day. And we're here most Thursdays at noon. You can find out a little bit more on the Dallas Public Library's website as well.
All right. Thank you so much. I love this program, by the way. I love this program that you guys are running. So thanks for having me be part of it.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. Sorry, I have my video off because my internet is not stable right now.
It's okay.
Yes, thank you. It's an amazing discussion. So I don't know, I'm going to ask Jordan, our technical person who's on the call, could we unmute everyone if anybody wanted to ask a question in person versus chat?
I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the live stream, and then we can just chat for a bit, and we'll
Awesome.
unmute everyone.
Perfect. Yeah. That way people feel a little more comfy. All right, now people are gonna get chat.
So feel free to ask any questions. I think